Welcome to the Camera Shake Podcast, episode 67. And of course, we're back in our respective homes thanks to COVID. Thank you very much. Anyway, today we have another special guest. But before we get into that, let me just tell you that you can see our lovely faces on YouTube, youtube.com/Camera Shake. If you are listening to the audio version of this. If not, if you're already on YouTube, just hit that subscribe button, like the thing and all of that kind of stuff that people usually tell you to do. You know what it's like. Anyway, without further ado, we have another super special guest on the show today. Please give it up for Mr. Colby Brown, landscape, travel, and humanitarian photographer, photo educator, the founder of The Giving Lens, and the master of photographic storytelling. Colby, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to have this conversation.
Excellent. Thank you so much for coming. We've explained this last week, but, we were meant to be together, Nick and me, in the same place, but,
It's COVID, man. Things get weird. It is what it is, right?
Exactly.
How's it? Damn UK for following the rules.
Damn us for following the rules. Yeah, so, this is, we make the best out of it. That's how we get through this,
Absolutely.
How are things over where you are?
It's interesting. We have the Delta variant going around a bit crazy, kind of like which you guys are dealing with as well. Yeah. But I think most Americans these days are kind of fed up with, listening to science and, health advisors and things like that. So we're kind of like acting like it's nothing, not a big deal. Yeah. But I think there's kind of a rude awakening coming, but I don't know. I guess we'll see what happens over the next month or two. But I don't know. It's weird for me. I just got back from Iceland. So I was in Iceland for a month. And Iceland's one of the few countries, I think, at least, that's kind of like handled COVID well. Like they shut down, they had contract tracing, like they did everything. They're a small country, as I'm sure you guys know. So it was maybe easier for them to combat. And so going there, vaccines are required to enter the country. They just opened up. So I was able to be around everywhere without a mask, without worry, because everyone's been tested and PCR tests and all that stuff. And then coming back to the US, where it's like starting to rage again, but people aren't wearing masks anymore. So the dichotomy is a bit strange for sure over this last week, trying to get back used to being back here in the States. But as we said, it is what it is.
Yeah. I was actually going to talk to you about this because my daughter is going on a school trip to Iceland in February with her geography class. And that it's been postponed from last year because obviously it didn't happen. But I think it's supposed to be February. So she's really worried that she might not be able to go, obviously, because of lockdowns and stuff. What's your sort of sense? Do you think that's going to be possible for her or not?
I think it'll be possible. I mean, obviously it's going to determine like what's happening this fall and winter to how much we get a handle on this. Like right now we're going through something we haven't gone through because we do have vaccinations out there. And right now what's happening with the Delta variant is like kind of ravaging the unvaccinated. It's almost becoming a pandemic of those that haven't had the either opportunity or have chosen not to take the vaccine. And so for places like Iceland, where last I checked, I think they're at like 95% of eligible vaccine constituents have taken it and are vaccinated. How well they control the influx of tourism and whatnot, and how they require vaccines for people to enter. And I think if a country can handle it, I think it's probably going to be Iceland. So I'd say that there's a pretty decent chance. But of course, as we've known, COVID is as known to wreck plans for all of us over the last year. So I'd be optimistic, but definitely pay attention to what's going on.
So what did you have to do when you first traveled there? Did you have to do like PCR tests on the US side and then in Iceland, or how did it actually work?
To leave the US, they don't care. I don't need to show anything. It's not a big deal. At least they don't think it's a big deal here. To enter Iceland, when I entered, so I arrived on June 26th, and that was just on July 1st, they had stopped the requirement for PCR tests in addition to showing that you have the vaccine. So I still had to get the nose swab on arrival and then wait 24 hours. And then once I got approval, then I was able to move around. Before that, they initially had required people to take like a 4 or 5 day quarantine, regardless, because they didn't have the rapid test at the time. But I was able to take the rapid test, took 24 hours, I was good. And then 4 days later, anyone that entered, as soon as you show that you have the vaccine, you don't actually have to have the test. Now, to re-enter the US, that's a different story. No matter where I'm at in the world, I still have to get a PCR test within 72 hours. Technically, it's actually the term is actually 3 days. So it's not hours to the hour. It's actually like if I fly out on Tuesday, I need to have a test by a Saturday. Based on that 3-day window. And then once I have that as a negative test, even though I am vaccinated, then you are allowed to board the flight. And so it's a FAA rule based on the federal government here that we have to get that in order to enter, even if we're vaccinated. At least that's the rules for now.
Cool. So what were you doing out in Iceland, Colby? Were you running a workshop?
Yeah, so I had, I was doing a couple of things. I was running a project for a marketing campaign for Dell, and as well as a small one for Western Digital. And then I had my first workshop in a year since COVID hit, which was great. Everyone was wonderful. Again, it was great because of the requirement of vaccines, which I require on all my workshops anyway nowadays. And it was a blast. And then I stuck around for an extra week afterwards. My wife and son came out. It's their second time actually visiting Iceland. So we rented a camper van, and I was able to show them more of the glaciers and, of course, the volcano that's going active out there. So my 9-year-old son was able to see, active lava exploding out of the volcano, and, checking out geothermal pools and all sorts of fun stuff. So I ended up spending about, I think it was 27 days in Iceland, which was a nice break from life back here in the States, at least.
Man.
It was a lot of fun. I love Iceland.
That's incredible. I mean, it's a place that it's ridiculous, right? It's over here. People say, "Oh, I'd love to go to Iceland. I'd love to go to Ireland." All those kind of places that are just really local to us over here in the UK. There's absolutely no excuse not to have gone. But Iceland is one of those places I've never actually been to, and you see photos, you see videos, and we've spoken to a number of people on this podcast who have been over to Iceland, and there's nothing but good things to say about it. There's nothing negative about Iceland. It's just, why haven't we been? Kay, why haven't we been? Tell me.
Because it's too cold, man. It's just too cold.
It's not. It's probably colder for you guys. It's actually not too bad. Too bad in Iceland. But no, I mean, it's you could say the same about a lot of people in the States as well. I mean, it's like this unique spot that is, of course, this amazement of geothermal uniqueness around the world. It's one of the most active volcanic spots on the planet. And it's so diverse between its geology and kind of what you can see and experience there, and the waterfalls and the glaciers. And it's like this perfect little spot that's between the US and Europe. And so, going to Europe or going to the US, vice versa, and having a stopover in Iceland is kind of what they've marketed over the last, I've been going there for 11 years now. And they've done a good job of giving people an excuse if you are making that longer trip to, might as well stop for a couple of days. And that's usually how they get you. They tease you with a few day experience, and then you want more and more. And I think this last trip was my 35th trip there over the last 11 years, which is quite ridiculous when I say it out loud. But it just goes to show just how amazing the country truly is.
I'm pretty sure you should have a second passport now.
Yeah, I'm buying for it. I don't know. Depending on how the last election was going here, I was going to opt for it. But for now, at least, we're good.
They're going to give you the keys to the city soon.
Yeah, I'll take it, man. I would not be upset about living in Iceland.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I mean, it looks beautiful. It's one of these things, of course, from a photographic point of view, well, we've talked about it several times, Nick, haven't we? We're sort of semi-planning trips over the next couple of years. And, I think it's going to drain our bank accounts by the looks of it at this point. But yeah, it would definitely be great. So, obviously, as a travel photographer, just generally, because that's really what you do. For those people who don't know, I think COVID must have had a major impact on what you do over the last year and a half, 18 months.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it was interesting. I spent 2020, the beginning part of 2020, like a normal year, right? At least for me. I spent New Year's Eve in Uganda trekking with Silverback Gorillas with a few clients. And then from there, I went to Norway, and I taught a workshop photographing the Northern Lights. I did a video project for B&H there, video series. And then I was actually in Cuba right around March 10th to the 12th, right when the world shut down. Again, with clients like in the middle of Cuba being like, okay, well, airplanes might not be allowed back, so we should probably head back to the States. And from that moment forward, it was no travel. And it was, it was a blessing and a curse. And what I mean that is that I've been doing this for 15 years. I've worked for National Geographic. I own my own companies now, as we talked about with The Giving Lens, Colby Brown Photography. I travel on a normal year anywhere between 5 to 7 months out of the year. To be honest, I was getting a little bit burned out. And, with the excessive travel and being away from my family as much as I was. So COVID came for me personally at a very opportune time to kind of just take like a creative sabbatical. And I spent most of last year, while, obviously it hurt financially to lose as much revenue as I did, to be able to spend that much time with my family and be home all the time, and to spend so much more time playing Legos with my son or spending more quality time with my wife. It was actually really nice. It was a beautiful silver lining. And at the same time, as I mentioned, because I was hitting this kind of this burnout, or temporary burnout, I also had this like kind of creative wall. So like last year, while I did do a handful of projects because I kind of needed to make a little extra income, I was mostly just kind of at arm's length. And so it wasn't until the vaccine started coming out and earlier this year that things really started kicking back into gear. And it's really great to be back here and to be re-energized and to be excited again about travel and projects and expeditions and stuff that's going around. And of course, obviously with the Delta variant, things are up in the air a little bit. But it was nice to take the break. It was nice to spend time with the family. It was a bit painful financially, but we were able to survive and still do quite well, and try to reinvent ourselves like a lot of photographers out there trying to figure out new ways in order to create new revenue streams or expand ones that we'd kind of neglected. And so, I'm in the fortunate position where I wasn't directly affected by COVID and my personal family, and outside of the financial hit, it was a fun opportunity for me to rekindle my excitement for the creative side of things, for photography, for travel in general, and as I mentioned, to spend some great quality time with the family. So I'm one of the lucky ones for sure.
So spending, the last few years, traveling for 6 or 7 months of the year, and then having, 12 to 18 months kind of break from that, and doing all the things that you've been doing, getting all that time at home is a wonderful, break for you and a wonderful relief. Do you think, I appreciate it's going to be kind of slow moving for another few months at the very least, but do you think you'll spend less time traveling now going forward? Now you've kind of experienced that like kind of long-term period at home?
Yeah, I don't know if the correct term is less travel, but I think more specific, to be more pointed in the projects I work on, to be more careful about selecting, my calendar in terms of where I'm going and why and what I'm doing and the money that I'm making. It kind of, I guess I should say it reprioritizes things, right?
Right.
I think there's going to be a natural opening of the floodgates. And it's already kind of happened. So like, again, I didn't travel from March 10th of last year until May of this year. And it kind of, the floodgates just opened from there. I was doing projects in Costa Rica for some wildlife projects. And I was up in Alaska and then Vegas and then Iceland. And then now I'm taking the next month and a half off before things potentially start kicking back into gear again, depending on how things go worldwide. So I mentioned that because I think that when the faucet is off for so long, when it first starts back up, it's going to be a bit of a flood. There's going to be a lot of projects that companies are going to want to catch up on. There's going to be a lot of interest for people to take workshops. And I think I'd be remiss if I didn't take advantage of that. But I think once we get over this initial hump of like, hey, we're kind of settling into the term that I hate to use, the new normal, I think that I absolutely will pull a step back. I mean, I was already naturally gravitating at the end of 2019 to like start to outsource some of the projects I was doing, building out and expanding my team, bringing in other photography instructors into the umbrella of my company so that I don't have to be on every single trip. And I think there'll be a continuation of a prioritization of that as I move forward so that I'm a bit more picky when it comes to the specific experiences I'm going out there to either document, to capture, or to teach. And that will give me a bit more flexibility in order to spend more time with the family, but at the same time also piggyback some of those adventures, as we did in Iceland this past summer, just a few weeks ago, where I was doing some marketing campaigns at a workshop and then brought the family out. Like, we try to do that quite a bit as well. So finding this new balance of what that's going to look like so I don't get burned out again, I think is going to be the key. And so, yeah, I think there'll be some adjustments for sure after this initial flood of interest of people that's been, having cabin fever for the last, 16 months of wanting to travel or wanting to learn about photography and YouTube, or, this hands-off approach of consuming content that we all have been part of. People want to be back in the field. People want to have those experiences. And so, it'll be interesting to see how it all works out.
It's interesting, isn't it? Perhaps by stepping back slightly and being more, like you say, specific in what the travel that you do, and is kind of has led you to expanding your own team for your business, which then in turn will probably mean more trips actually happen as a business overall going forward, which means more revenue anyway. So it's actually interesting when you actually do take a step back and think about it that way. It's a very, very smart move, and I'm guessing that the last 12 to 18 months has given you the opportunity, the space to actually sort of rethink these things, look at how your business is operating, and see how you work on those adjustments, right?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I think, from a business standpoint, which I love the business side of things. I think a lot of creatives tend to kind of scoff at it, or just want to take pictures and travel the world and get paid for it, which isn't how it works. But from the business side of things, I think there's a lot of opportunity there. And I think a lot of photographers, a lot of creators, a lot of entrepreneurs don't always think about scalability, right? So I've been very fortunate in my 15-year career to make a very good living doing this between my different companies. And, when I start to look at the revenue streams that really bring in a lot of the bulk of the financial benefits for this, oftentimes a lot of those pieces have these kind of low ceilings. Like, it's high reward, high profitability, but low ceilings in terms of scalability. Like, I can only do so many workshops a year, right? I can only have feet on the ground in so many locations. Even if I was single and nomadic, let alone having, a wife and son and family back here in the Eastern US. And so, absolutely taking that break give me more opportunity to kind of think proactively about, where do I want to be in 2 years? Where do I want to be in 5 years? I still want to be traveling. I still want to be having these experiences. I still want to be focusing on, humanitarian conservation efforts like I do with some of my organizations. But at the same time, I want to be more present. I want to be a more present husband and father. And so this has given me that space to kind of think more proactively about it. And I'm excited to see kind of where it takes me and the challenges that are certainly going to come to allow those ideas to come to fruition. But it's definitely, like I said, it's reprioritized things for me, which has helped. It's helped give me a sense of perspective that I had before, but didn't have the time to really think about. And I've certainly had that break, as we all have. And now, like I said, we'll see where it goes.
I think there's so much good stuff in what you just said there that anyone listening at the moment, rewind the last sort of 5 or 10 minutes and listen to that again. It will trigger a few little thoughts in your mind about your own business and how you go about looking at that, because there's some nuggets of gold in there, I promise you.
It's also the whole silver lining thing. Where sometimes when you find yourself in a situation like this that at the beginning looks like a total shock to the system, it's about sort of recalibrating, and then trying to kind of zone out of the negatives, and refocusing on the potential positives. Because I think it's really interesting, having spoken to quite a lot of guests on the show over the last year or so. It's really interesting to get people's perspective and to see how as individuals, we have dealt with, with the thing that's really affected all of us, and all the positives that have come out of it. It's been amazing to witness actually over the last year.
Absolutely. Well, I think it's easy to go negative, right? I mean, it takes less effort in a challenging situation like dealing with COVID, whether it's, again, financial or health or any of these other aspects, to really kind of just either go to the negative or like hone in and just like focus on it. And I think that, once you break out of that, it really opens up more opportunities. And I think that's kind of, the mindset that I've always had. Like if we look back at like the 2008, 2009 financial crisis, like a similar situation happened. It was a very challenging financially for a lot of companies, a lot of individuals, a lot of entrepreneurs. But out of that came revitalization. It became creativity. It came people reinventing themselves. And there was so much potential positivity for those that were willing to change their mindset to try to look at the situation differently. And there were a lot of companies that also folded and that couldn't handle it. And we're seeing the same thing right now. And I think a lot of it comes down to how you choose to live your life. There's so many of these variables that we can't control, right? Whether it's personal or business or financial, there's only so much that we can. And once you absolve yourself of the responsibility of trying to control things you can't control, it really becomes a freeing experience to, to change the way you look at the world, to change the way you look at business, to change the way you look at relationships, like anything. It's rather exciting, I think. And it's hard to have those moments of, rejuvenation or excitement for creativity when a lot of people are struggling around the world. But again, there's only so much that you can individually do. And I think that the more of us individuals that can change that mindset and try to approach these challenging situations in a more, positive or pragmatic light, I think the better.
Yeah, it's totally true. This, I remember the turning point actually, and I've written a very long blog on scottkelby.com. If you are listening and you want to check it out, we put a link in the thing. About that exact point, because we've talked about we kind of talked this to death really on this podcast, but of course there was a point for both Nick and I, at the very beginning where, after the initial shock to the system and the realization that we now have a lot of time to watch a lot of Marvel movies, there was a point where it's like, right, okay, something's got to change, and then of course you start thinking about, okay, I can't control this, I can't control that, and I have no control over this. What can I actually control? And then you start shifting the other way and you go like, okay, now forget about what I can't do. Let's focus on the things that we can do. And then, and that's led us to where we are today. And, it's an interesting thing. I had this discussion the other day and I kind of thought, my sort of photographic career was going a certain way before COVID. And weirdly, both Nick and I, we both now ended up in a completely different place because of COVID. And that's really interesting because it's rather than it putting a stop to things or like slowing us down, it's actually, although we've gone in a slightly different direction, it's weirdly accelerated a lot of things. Yeah. And that's been a really positive experience, not only in terms of like, the things that we do, but also the things that we know now. Because even, as we always say, this podcast is a great learning experience, not only for our listeners, but also for us, because we get to talk to people who are really good at what they do. And it's like, I'll tell you a little story about my efforts in landscape photography. We'll have a jolly good laugh about that in a minute. But I mean, it's been extremely, worthwhile and useful for us to do. To even start this podcast and do all sorts of other projects that we've only we've come back from a little side project yesterday that really we're only doing because of the podcast and because of the people that we've spoken to, and it's given us all sorts of different ideas. So it's been a really positive experience for us too, and hopefully for all of you listening as well.
Yeah, and if it hasn't, now's the time to try to change that mindset.
That's right.
Exactly. I think you put it really elegantly in terms of like kind of how it worked for you. Like you hit these walls and you have to find a new pathway. I mean, it's the journey for either entrepreneurship or even life in general or creativity is a river, right? So if you get some boulders, you get things in the way, like the river has to find a pathway through. It's not going to just stop and overflow. And, creating a new pathway for the river that you're on, I think is the key. And, continuing to move forward, whatever direction that forward may be, which might be left or right or something else that you didn't even think of before. And that's what presents those opportunities.
Yeah, exactly. So let's talk about landscape photography then, because I'll give you a little bit of background. So I'm not a landscape photographer at all, but I love landscape photography. And one of the things that I was going to do last summer, was I was going to link up with some family of mine in Canada, in Nova Scotia, and I was going to take that as an opportunity to kind of improve my landscape photography game. That, of course, never happened because travel went out the window, and and it just didn't happen. And so, what I'd like to know is, like, how did you, like, first of all, was landscape photography, was that the kind of thing that got you into photography in the first place, or was that something that you developed over time?
I think it was more of a natural progression. I mean, I got into photography mostly because of a love, or at the time, a little bit of an obsession of travel. Mm-hmm. I was fortunate to travel a bit in high school, and then throughout college, I take a semester off here and there and kind of take a break through my studies and go travel around. So I got the travel bug early. By the time I graduated, I really just wanted to be back on the road. I was single, I was nomadic, I didn't have much debt. Like I had enough freedom to be able to make that choice to sit there and say, hey, this is something I'm really interested in. I like being outside my comfort zone. I want to learn more about different ways of life and different, thoughts and beliefs and ideals. And so I picked up my first camera, my own digital camera, solely because I was like, hey, maybe I can document some of these experiences that I really want to have from a personal standpoint, and maybe make a little bit of money on the side, and it will help me, pay some bills, and I can travel for longer. And so it was that the first few years was mostly focused around that idea of travel experiences. And then naturally over time, my interests changed and morphed and evolved, where I started finding myself being drawn to different types of experiences. And some of those experiences were based on kind of having solitude in nature. And that's kind of where the landscape came in, where I wanted to maybe get away from people. And I just, wanted to take a step back from humanity. And I wanted to go and spend some time in Nepal, in the Himalayas. I did that early in my career. I spent a couple months living up in the Himalayas, documenting some projects around the Sherpa people. But on my free time, I was able to explore these areas that were relatively untouched by man. And it just really got me excited about that idea of building a relationship with nature, and kind of how everything works together, and that idea of the perspective and the grandeur and the beauty of nature, and how can I capture that better? How can I be better at sharing those experiences with other people that might not have those opportunities? And so that's kind of where landscape came in, and the other genres that I've kind of morphed into over the years. I do quite a bit of wildlife now. It's actually probably a predominant focus. Obviously, humanitarian work that I do through the Giving Lens. Each of these interest in different genres of photography have stemmed out of the desire to not be too consistent in terms of my interests, because I think too much consistency freaks me out a bit. Like if I did the same thing over and over again, like I don't think I could handle that, just from a psychological standpoint. And so I like the challenges of trying new things, and starting off with travel and being excited about it, still being excited about it, but wanting to branch out and challenge myself more. And let me go to some more of the remote places around the world. How can I plan for that? How do I prepare for that? How do I survive in some of these locations? How do I document? And then from there, it's like, oh, I'm in this cool location. Like there's a puma. How do I document that? How do I track puma? How do I, go to some more of these remote places around the world, or different places around the world to photograph or document endangered species or things like that. And same thing came, like I said, with humanitarian. It's like this particular cause, youth education programs, or clean drinking water projects, women's vocational schools, Syrian refugees coming into Jordan because of what's happening in the Middle East. Like each of those have stemmed from this desire to challenge myself, to better myself from a individual standpoint, but also from a creative standpoint. And so there's been this natural progression over my career to constantly want to challenge myself and feel that I have more to learn, and I have more to bring to the table. And once that well drives up, maybe I'll pick a different career. But for now, it's still quite exciting. And every day I'm trying to learn new things and get inspired by new individuals, and try and experiment with different types of photography.
I bet I can only imagine you've got thousands of stories over the trips that you've been on. I'm particularly interested in some of your wildlife stories that you might have, and some. I'm sure there's been some scraps and scrapes that you've got into to capture what you wanted.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it depends on the type of trip, but I mean, over the years, I try to. I was a little bit more. I don't want to say adventurous. I was a little bit maybe stupid when I was, early in my career when I didn't have a wife and son, and I was a little bit more willing to try to do things that I might not have should have been doing. But even now, I find myself occasionally in situations, obviously with certain types of animals that, the goal with wildlife photography is not put yourself in a position where you let the animal make a bad choice, right?
Right.
And so that's often what I do. So whether I'm tracking jaguars, say in Brazil, like we're doing it from the safety of a boat. Now, of course, a jaguar could jump into one of these boats as we get close to shore, but like that just doesn't happen. I've had times where I've had false charges from rhinos or from African elephants in East Africa that had gotten pretty dang close to a vehicle. But again, you have the right guides or the right, driver, the people that are paying attention to help have your back as you kind of have these blinders on as I'm photographing video or doing, photography. Where things really get interesting for me is actually more so when you're on the ground with some of these amazing creatures. Silverback Gorillas is one of the ones I love talking about the most because it's probably my favorite to document in the entire world. And the reason why I personally find them to be so fascinating is the similarities they have obviously with human beings in terms of sharing so much of the genetic code, but their mannerisms, how they act and how they engage, but how they how big the big male silverbacks are, and to really have that idea or that humbling experience of not being the alpha species in an environment on the ground. You're not in a Land Cruiser in Africa traveling around, safely from cheetahs and leopards and lions. You're on the ground with these creatures which are herbivores, but the big boys can crush you if they wanted to. And I've had a number of times because I'm 6'3". I'm bald. I'm white, so I have a shiny head. Like I attract a lot of attention from some of these species, and so oftentimes when I go do work with the silverbacks, like I get false charged because I'm the largest person in their habitation, habituation area, and those are always a little bit. I don't want to say worrisome, but heart stops for a second or so when the ground starts pounding and a silverback's coming and you just got to stand your ground and do your thing. Those are probably, at least in the last couple of years, probably some more of the more, like I said, not scary moments, but definitely ones that make you think that or appreciate our place in the world. Compared to a lot of other wildlife experiences out there where, like I said, it's a little bit more at arm's reach. So you don't have to worry so much. But Silverback Gorillas, if anyone's out there, you guys watching, if you guys are interested in wildlife photography at all, or just animals, it is by far the most intimate and amazing experience that you can have. Uganda, Rwanda are the two best countries to go explore and visit them in. And once COVID settles down, I highly recommend you guys check it out. Whether you join me on a workshop out there or do it yourself, like it's a life-changing experience, and I don't use that term lightly.
I think it's an absolute privilege to be able to get near those particular animals. As I don't know what it is today, but certainly several years ago when I heard the number, there was only a few thousand left in the wild. I'm guessing that's less now, I've no doubt. And it won't be long before no one's going to have the opportunity to actually be close to them, be in their presence, have the opportunity to take a photo of them. Is just, do it now. Absolutely do it now before there's no chance left.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the right now the silverback gorillas it's less than 1,000, I believe.
Wow.
But it's actually, there's some good news in that because a lot of the conservation efforts from the Uganda Wildlife Authority, from what's happening in Rwanda, even in the Congo, who's had civil war for the last 30 years, like the numbers are actually increasing because of the significance put on security and educating for the local, local citizens in these countries for the value of these amazing creatures. And we're seeing much less of what we used to see, specifically when it comes to the silverback gorillas, where they were getting killed for poachers and stuff like that. Yeah. So there's some positivity happening that's come out from the amazing stories and experiences, and people being able to have those experiences, document them, and share them with other people out there to raise money and funds and all sorts of other great things. But you're right. I mean, the world's changing, and there are other creatures out there for sure that are getting affected by human, either interaction or things like poaching or climate change or all sorts of other stuff. And certain species, depending on where your interest may be, may not be around in another 20 or 30 years. And that's it's a sad state of affairs. And hopefully we can change some of that. And, some of the work that I do is aimed at that. So a lot of the work that a lot of my colleagues do is aimed at that. And there's some positivity, and there's a lot of good stuff happening too. But we still have quite a bit of a fight on our hands in order to try to save some of these species and not leave such an impact from the human species ravaging the earth like we have had a tendency to do for the last couple hundred years at least.
Couldn't agree more. A friend of mine went on his honeymoon to Uganda, specifically to go and see the silverbacks, and he said you used the word life-changing a few minutes ago, and that's pretty much what he said when he came back. It's just, you're just in awe of them when you're there. And he said if you ever get the opportunity to go, just do it. Save for as many years as you need to, whatever it might be. It's well worth it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What else can you say about them? It's just
How do you plan for expeditions like this? Because this is the one thing that I've always been interested in when I've been following, let's say wildlife photographers or National Geographic photographers, for example. Is I've always wondered how much planning goes into an expedition like that. Do you meticulously? Because I'm guessing that there are a number of factors that you just can't plan for.
Sure.
For instance, we had a conversation with Dave Williams at some point. We're talking about some of his Arctic expeditions, and the question was like, well, how do you know? You going through all the the hardship of traveling there, with planes, cars, boats, whatever, canoes, and you get to the point and the weather is crap. You go, damn it,
Sure.
Sure. This is the thing. I always think how much planning goes into a typical expedition for you?
Quite a lot. It depends on the expedition. Obviously, it depends on the duration or the specificity of the rareness of what I'm trying to document, right? Is it something that's more general? Is it just documenting silverback gorillas in general? Or is it a very specific type of, experience or something that I'm going after, which makes it a bit more rare. But for the most part, depending on if it's a country I've been to many times, that conversation usually starts with finding people I can trust on the ground, which depending on the country can be difficult, right? Some of these expeditions can be quite expensive, and sending thousands of dollars, sometimes a lot more, to individuals you don't personally know can be unnerving. I've had times. I had one time in Tanzania with one of my companies, the phone of our contact, who is trustworthy, was hacked, and the bank wire transfer was changed at the last minute, which we didn't catch, and ended up sending, I think it was $12,000 that just vanished in thin air because it was gone.
You didn't send it to some Nigerian prince by any chance, did you?
It was not a Nigerian prince. It was apparently a Tanzanian prince. No, it was... But it was, stuff like that happens. And for me, I usually go for word of mouth with people I trust. So guides that I know, that I've worked with for years in places like Africa, who do they recommend? Colleagues of mine from Nat Geo days, or other people within the wildlife or general adventure travel space. We all have our favorites, right? And I've had a number of times where I'm like, hey, I want to go to this place to do that. And I reached out to people and I'm like, hey, do you have a fixer? Do you have someone that on the ground here or here? And they say, yeah, I got this person. He's the best. I send them a message, or they put me in contact, and it's like, kismet. It's perfect. There's no problems. Like they work out all the details. Other times when it's a place that I don't have contacts or I can't find it, then it can be a bit more challenging, and usually have to go and scout it first and make sure I can trust these individuals. But having a fixer on the ground is like gold. The value they bring from local information to be able to deal with the nuances of little things such as translation, to navigating permits that you need depending on the type of location or what you're trying to document, can be a godsend. And so that's usually the first stage of where I'm at, is trying to find a fixer on the ground that can help me realize the idea I have in my head of what I'm trying to do. And then from there, it's just quite a bit of research, the time of year, how much duration. I always try to build in number of days when it comes to dealing with bad weather, depending on the country, also dealing with just really crappy logistics, bad road infrastructure, the dependability of domestic, flights, or even renting our own planes and Cessnas, things like that all come into play when it comes into, I may be going to a location to document a very specific thing, but I'm going to give myself 12 days, even though I only really need probably 2 of those days, so that I can attempt to account for, as you said, bad weather, or cars breaking down, popped tires, all sorts of stuff that absolutely always happens. There's never a trip that doesn't have some sort of fun nuance in it. And so yeah, like I said, doing the research, having people you can trust on the ground, and then giving yourself enough flexibility and time in order to account for the unaccountable, I think, is always the key. And it doesn't always work out. I remember on my last polar bear expedition up to Churchill, Canada, spent a lot of money putting that together, and went out there, and it was a wonderful year for the bears because the freeze came early, which on Lake Hudson means that the ice shelf is expanded, which has been contracting for years, which has been very problematic for the endangered polar bear. But when the ice shelf freeze early, then the polar bears can get out early, which means they can go hunt on the harp seals, and they have a higher chance at survival. All amazing things, except if you arrive when you're supposed to arrive, when it's not supposed to freeze and the bears are supposed to be around, and then it freezes and all the bears leave, and you're kind of sitting out there in the tundra in like negative 50 degrees, temperatures, with nothing to shoot for a week, is always a fun. When you look around, you're like, okay, there's no birds, there's no nothing, like there's nothing here. Yeah. Like, what am I doing? Those experiences can happen. And you just kind of have to deal with it and roll with the punches when it comes to weather and wildlife and all sorts of other things. But it's a challenge.
I was watching a sort of a BTS video of like a David Attenborough program, like Planet Earth or something like that. It was one of the more recent ones, and I forget now where they were and what they were shooting, but they were sat in a hide basically for 2 months. 2 months. They got one shot.
Yeah,
one shot, but that's all they needed. But that's what it took to get what they needed. That's how rare this particular animal was to see. And it's just, I thought to myself at the time, I said, do I have the patience for that? I don't know. I just don't know.
Probably not, man. To be fair, I probably don't even have the patience for that. Like I'll go to places and wait for days and maybe a week or two to try to get something like that. But some of the things, especially the BBC Wildlife, those guys, oh man, they're on a different level. It's a different playing field for those individuals. And as we watch those amazing shows and Planet Earth and all that stuff, like, it pays off. But would any of us really want to be the individual, like sitting in that hide, getting bit by all sorts of random things for 2 months to get one shot? Maybe not. I don't know. I think that it takes a certain individual to be able to really handle that from a professional and a psychological standpoint. And I don't know if I'm that person.
No, me either.
Who was it?
Okay, how about you?
I don't know. Do you remember when we spoke to Moose Peterson, and we're talking about his wildlife photography, and we kind of came to the point where we asked, like, how do you, like, what kind of qualities do you need, as a wildlife photographer? And he goes, like, patience. I could sometimes I sit on a rock and I wait for 9 hours for something to come out of a hole. I'm just really good at watching holes. It's like, wow, okay.
That's a t-shirt right there.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's absolutely true. And that's probably, when I think about when I think about myself as a human being and like about my sort of levels of patience, that's probably one of the reasons why I never got into, or why I never really seriously got into landscape photography in the first place, is because it does very often entail having to get yourself out of bed really early in the morning and then dragging your sorry self into some field, and then you end up staring at a tree whilst you're waiting for the sun to go, and like, and this is the thing, and like where I come from shooting concerts and and music and stuff like that, it's completely different. You basically, all the action is there, it's all happening really fast, and then before you know it, it's over and you're going home. So I have no problem staying up until 4 o'clock in the morning shooting a gig, but I find it very hard to get myself up at 4 o'clock in the morning to sit in some field.
Well, I find it's like subjective patience too, because if you play that, if you switch those roles, like an individual, like I've gone to Patagonia and waited 5 days for light to, for clouds to move and light to hit a mountain peak, and I have no problems doing that. But like staying up late at a loud concert, even if it's a shorter duration, I'm dealing with different other types of, loud noises or other things that I don't have patience for.
Yeah.
I've kind of find that over the years as well, because it definitely comes down to what you're willing to subject yourself to, because what for some consider patience, others are like, oh, I'm just waiting for this one epic, amazing shot that's going to be totally worth it. And you're like, I'm going to stay up late and get these great images, and it doesn't take a lot of time. And I love this, the atmosphere of what's going on here. I definitely feel that across the board, which has been interesting for me, as I mentioned before, shooting a lot of different genres of photography. When I first started getting into travel and landscape, I was that same individual that was like, wildlife photography, I'm not going to go sit in a tree and go wait for a bird for, hours on end. Like, who would do that? And then like fast forward 10 years, I'm like in the middle of Brazil, like waiting in the morning for that thing to happen. And like, you just never know. So yeah, I don't know. You're 100% right. It's all about patience. Yeah. But like I said, subjective patience for sure.
It's also something I think that I feel like it changes over time. I mean, now, 10 years on, I have a much, a very different appreciation for like, landscape or wildlife photography and photographers. And, I think about things very differently now than I did 10 years ago. I mean, 10 years ago, I was like, no way I'm going to sit in the field. Screw that. But, now it's like, I look at, your photography and, at Dave Williams' photography, and I think like, wow, okay, now I understand what it takes to create these type of images. And, it's like I'm much more in a frame of mind where I think like, well, that's what it takes. That's what it takes.
Sure.
Let's go do it.
Well,
I mean,
it's interesting. I mean, bringing up that subject, because I think social media, which has been very beneficial to my companies and myself, it also creates this false sense of reality when it comes to a lot of the stuff that we see on Instagram, for example, where you see these, an image of for wildlife of, a panther or a jaguar or a leopard or a silverback gorilla. And it's like, oh, this is extremely accessible, but you don't see all the stuff that goes into it. And I think that's kind of one of the negative sides of this consumption age we are in photography, where we're consuming all this stuff, but we don't necessarily always understand the context of what it takes to actually have those experiences. And while they're still attainable, oftentimes they require a lot of effort or, sometimes a lot of sacrifice. I mean, I don't share too many images of me, laying on the floor in, East Africa with malaria and feeling like crap and, throwing up in a sketchy toilet and all that stuff. But like, those are parts of the experiences that sometimes are required in order to get to some of these more remote places and to photograph more challenging things. And so it's always interesting, just talking about that small little segue into understanding the significance of what goes behind a shot, because we're so used to seeing all these beautiful images in places like Instagram constantly, that I think sometimes we don't understand that context.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's it's the same, or it's very similar actually when it comes to like street photography, for example. Where you look at an account and you see like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of amazing images, and you kind of go, it can't be that hard. I mean, it's like 1,000 images on there. It can't be that difficult until you actually speak to the person. You realize that, they're out there 4 or 5 days a week, really grinding and creating in order to create these images. This is a very interesting conversation we had with Nina Walsh Kling, when we talked to her about how she creates the images that she creates, and, we were thinking like, well, like, she must be so good. She must go out and come back with a whole bunch of amazing keepers, and there's Nick and me going into town, and we're like, we're spending like 8 hours, and we're like, oh, we only have one photo that's any good.
What'd you get? Nothing?
We're just not, like, we're just not cut out for this. Until you realize that, it's the same for everyone. And then, it's just the difference being Nick and me go out once in the blue moon. And then there are people who do this like every day,
all the time,
and just work their ass off basically to create that kind of imagery. And that, it really, it does make you understand how difficult it really is to create that body of work. And this is the thing about Instagram in particular. I see this a lot, across different styles of photography, is that, you're really looking at a body of work. And then once you look at it you look at it as a body of work, you understand how much time and effort and patience and work has actually gone into it. Because you can take any other art form, like take painting. If you look at, take any famous painter, over the lifetime, they create a body of work, but it does take a long time to create that body of work in the first place. And this, I always find that it's given me like a totally new, completely different appreciation of what people go through to create that kind of imagery, for sure. And that's, I looked at your Instagram account. The first time I saw your Instagram account, I'm like, what the heck?
Are these real?
Do that? That's amazing. But do you spend a lot of time curating your like Instagram account, your social media? Or how do you approach that in the first place?
Not too much. I've been very fortunate with social media. I started my first photography company, Colby Brown Photography, in 2006, like a year after like Zuckerberg launched Facebook, right? So I've been a part of most of the big launches. And so I've been able to ride a lot of those interest waves of photographers and just general content consumption and the visual nature of things like Instagram to my benefit. And because of that, I've had quite a big following and a good amount of engagement across multiple different platforms, some that don't exist anymore, like Google Plus, to some that are obviously still around, like Instagram. And for the most part, I try to just post stuff that I'm interested in. Same way I shoot. I think a lot of up and coming photographers are constantly trying to reinvent themselves, to adjust themselves to their audience. And I just think that I find that problematic from a sustainability standpoint and from a longevity standpoint of being able to constantly feel like you're a chameleon, to be able to document how other people want to see your stuff rather than photograph what you like and what you enjoy and process it how you want to, and then spend the time and the effort to find the audience that appreciates what you're doing. Yeah. And so I've had the fortune of the latter option, to sit there and build the audience based around these kind of evolving interests. And so I don't have to spend a lot of time being like, what should I share next? And do I do this? I do pay attention a bit to statistics and to sit there and say, okay, do I have a higher chance at sharing different times of the day? I've started to spread out like my posts, like on Instagram, for example, to a couple times a week rather than every single day, just to kind of change things up and also not be tied to it so much. But it's usually just that kind of superficial level, looking at it and wanting to share work that I'm proud of, but not necessarily going to the nth degree to be like, how does everything look in my profile? Does all the colors match? Like, that's not my style. I see some Instagrammers out there, and not to talk in a condescending way, but it's like you look at their profile and it's like, it's the same color pattern, almost like the same preset for every single image. And like,
right.
There's something to that, I guess. You're putting your stamp on the world, and maybe there's something pleasing to the eye that makes sense that you either have found to be successful or someone told you was successful. But for me, like every image is individual. Like the subject requires a specific approach to how I document it, to how I process it. So while there's some common threads throughout the, how the overall feel and look and the aesthetic of my work, like every image also stands out on its own, or at least I feel that way. And so I don't try to conform to those ideals rather than to play up to the choice of image and the choice of composition and exposure and post-processing that emphasize that initial choice of the subject matter I'm trying to capture, and then share it out there and push it out there. And so when you look at the feed that I have on something like Instagram, it's quite eclectic, and it's a big mixture of different types of things, and some of them are processed very differently. And I don't know, I kind of enjoy that. I like that it speaks to the story that I'm trying to tell rather than just my story experiencing all these other things. I don't think there's a wrong way to do it, but for me personally, I prefer that individualistic approach to letting the image tell the story rather than let me try to always tell the story through the prism of the color scheme I think is correct or something like that.
I think I always find it problematic when people shoot for social media. It doesn't ever really sit well with me when I see those kind of accounts where exactly, well, this whole thing's just been put together for this one purpose and nothing else, and then immediately to me always seems very one-dimensional because there's nothing behind it. There's nothing else to discover. It's really just solely all about how it fits onto the grid, and then you go, okay.
And then you're bored, and then I usually do the same thing, and then I go somewhere else.
yeah, exactly, right. It's like this is just a straight flick for me.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's talk about the Giving Lens a little bit. So that's a project you launched a few years ago. Tell us a little bit about what that's all about.
Sure. So the Giving Lens launched in 2011. And essentially, the idea behind it was to create almost like an advocacy organization that works with a variety of different organizations, charitable entities, communities, families that are championing, specific causes around the world, typically in developing countries. So, as I mentioned before, we do a lot of work with youth education programs. We've done projects with women's vocational schools in the Middle East. We've done work with Syrian refugees coming out of Syria and heading into Jordan. We've done work with family migrant trains coming out of Central and South America, coming into Mexico, trying to get to the US. And what we do is we bring teams of photographers almost in a workshop-like experience where we're teaching people how to be better photographers. But at the same time, their goal or their purpose is to help these communities or help these organizations fight for these very specific causes. So sometimes we are bringing donated camera gear and we're training an organization how to better document the projects that they're doing so they can raise more funds and they can be better about their own advocacy down the line. So it's a bit more sustainable and empowering. Sometimes we are documenting very specific projects so that we can help with fundraising. It really depends on the needs of the organization and the challenges that are facing a specific community or a specific country. And then the money that we raise for this workshop-like experience from these participants coming from all over the world then gets folded back into, and a lot of that revenue stream comes right back to the communities. So we donate the vast majority of that money back to these organizations, keep a little bit so that we can keep the gears running and so we can do more of these projects around the world. And then it allows us to do more, to raise more money, to do more advocacy work, to do more fundraisers, and to ultimately help more people out there. And so it's a pretty unique organization. I found kind of around those early days, especially when I was heavily into travel photography, that there was a handful of issues or nuances or things that just really bugged me about the whole travel photography or travel space. One of those was the superficial nature of travel, right? We travel to these locations and we see a very small sliver of what it's actually like for these individuals or the people or the communities that we're documenting as we travel around. And that never really sat right with me. I always kind of wanted to get beneath the superficial nature and try to really talk to individuals and really break down have those conversations, those hard conversations sometimes. I also didn't like that there was not this two-way street of a relationship building. Especially for travel photographers and tourists. Like we show up into these places and then we have our camera and we stick it in someone's face and we take a picture and we walk away, and there's like that's just such a bad experience for the other individual. It's very dehumanizing. And so I wanted to break that one as well. I wanted to change the way that we approach, the human side of documenting travel experiences and to make it more real and to make it more beneficial for everyone. And then tied to that same thing is just the financial side of things. Like we never really know where our money is going, right? Like we stay in a hotel and we're in Kenya or Cambodia. Most of the time that money, that hotel is owned by a foreign company, maybe in France or Germany or Canada or the US. And so having a bit more idea of the money of that we choose to spend in these places, whether it's with a tour agency or the logistical planning or hotel stay or choice to do hotels or homestays, we want to make sure that we're more proactive with where that money goes. And so the Giving Lens became a conduit to be able to help me personally solve those issues, but then also allow me to solve those issues for other people. Because I think a lot of photographers want to do more with their photography or their passion for photography and art, but they don't know where to start. And they also don't even know sometimes to ask those questions of where's my money going? Who am I actually helping? Is what I'm experiencing real? Or is this just a kind of like a puppet show for tourists that jump off a bus and to have some sort of, experience? And so the Giving Lens has allowed me to, like I said, to solve a lot of those issues, to raise a lot of money for a lot of organizations around the world, and try to do some good and to get people inspired and excited about helping other people in these kind of collaborative learning environments and being in a really cool, unique location and having a unique experience that you really can't get anywhere else. You can't work with the families that we work with if you take a standard tour of the Masai Mara in Kenya, or you go see Angkor Wat in Cambodia, or visit Hyderabad in India. We get access because we have these connections with these local communities to break through that superficial nature of those experiences, and then allows people to have eye-opening sense of reality of what it's like for these individuals or these communities or the challenges that they're facing. And so, yeah, it's multifaceted. It's ever evolving. Like I said, we've been doing it now for 10 years. COVID's been a bit of a hit because the vast majority of what we do is take people to countries. So we've been on hiatus as well for the last year, but we're gearing up for 2022 for a lot of great projects around the world, revisiting some old ones, starting some new ones. It's exciting times for sure. But yeah, like I said, Giving Lens is meant to help people share their love of photography in a meaningful and tangible way that makes a difference for other individuals, that we do all the legwork for you so that you get a chance to just focus on that experience and helping people through your love of photography.
What an amazing thing to have been doing for 10 years and fulfilling all at the same time. Helping and being fulfilled for yourself is just absolutely mind-blowing. I
appreciate that.
I couldn't agree more with you with regards to the superficial nature that you can see when you visit as a tourist or as you say as a travel photographer. And in a previous life, I used to travel to. You mentioned Hyderabad there. I used to travel to Hyderabad all the time for work and not photography related work, but just office work. And at the time, I was, the first couple of trips, you just see all the usual kind of stuff, right? And then you see the inside and outside of a, multinational company's office. You see nothing, right? But once I got to know the people out there a lot better, I got invited by several colleagues to go to their homes and see what things were like there. They used to talk to me about what it was really like to live in Hyderabad, even in their, for want of a better phrase, perhaps slightly higher status in India. But they obviously had lots of family and friends who weren't like that, and we went around and visited those people too, in all the poorer areas of Hyderabad and Bangalore as well. And it's not until you see that side of things that you really appreciate the city or the country for what it is and the people who live in it. And It was really eye-opening for me. And I was in my 20s as well at the time, and very inexperienced and naive. Is probably a better word to those type of things. But it totally changed the way I look at the world and how I look at people in general. And it is probably single-handedly one of the major experiences that just changed my outlook on life, and awesome. It is the probably the best thing I've ever done was to travel to India on the number of occasions that I did, and I would never change that.
You're 100% right. I mean, that it's that type of experience that I think a lot of people aren't obviously fortunate to experience it. It was a challenge for me early on, right? So when 2006, I bought a one-way ticket to Southeast Asia. Like that's how I started my photography career. Like I just wanted to travel. Again, like I said, I was single, nomadic. Bought a one-way ticket, ended up living in Southeast Asia for years. And I remember coming back to the States in those early years and, walking into a Walmart for the first time and just being like sick to my stomach, like seeing the amount of excess that I was observing, how much food we throw away, for example, in restaurants and stuff like that. And I got very bitter for those first few years because I wasn't taking into account that other people hadn't had those experiences. They don't necessarily know any better. It's not necessarily a justification for ignorance, but there's reality to it, right? And so, that type of idea of how do we show that? How do we reveal the realities of what it's like for the vast majority of people that live on this planet to how they live, to the challenges they face, to what is reality? It was one of the driving forces, like I said, between the Giving Lens. And it's great to hear that you had a similar type of experience and how that just kind of, like you said, opens up your eyes to the realities of maybe what you took for granted and what other people think happens and that kind of plight, that journey of both for you self-discovery, but also for the kind of opening up your mind and bit of your heart to like what other people experience, I think is great. The more we do that as a species, the better it is for everyone. And all too often I find that we tend to segregate and separate rather than to feel like we're interconnected. And I hope that changes over time, but it's a little, it's little changes at a time, individuals, right. And then you share that experience with other people, and hopefully that becomes viral in nature, and more people start to care. But it's those types of experiences that I think are vitally important.
It's also, on a human level, I agree totally with what you just said about, segregating things and stuff like that. On a more human level, like for instance, I find that even within Europe, for example, I'm sort of I'm an immigrant where we are here in the UK because I'm not from the UK, and and so in the past I've lived in a number of different countries. And the one thing that staggers me really always is how people in general, obviously I'm generalizing, but how people very often focus on the differences, when the reality is that it doesn't matter, no matter whether you're German, for example, or British, it's like, we have like 99.9% of things in common. There's really just like, let it be 1% that's different. And why are we focusing on that one little 1%? But when when the reality is we're all having the same fears and and whatever, we're all concerned about our kids getting an education or having a job and all, whatever it may be. But the fact is, it's like we have so much in common. It staggers me every time when people talk about like how this is different, how that is different. And I always think like, well, okay, so the food in Germany is different. Why don't you embrace that for a while? I mean,
sure.
It's weird. I've never understood that, and I've lived. I don't know how long have I been here? Like 25 years or something. I don't know.
I don't get it. I mean, if you look back at history, like we as a species tend to have a tendency to do this, sadly. You know what I mean? Like it's always like us versus them, our city, that city, this ethnicity, that ethnicity, my belief system, your belief system, not even taking into account just religion, but like all sorts of other stuff. Like we're constantly looking to like ways to be like, I'm different than another person. I'm different than that person. As I think you said it right. Like we share so much in common and so much of those same fears and idiosyncrasies and imperfections. We should spend more time focusing on how we're interconnected and how we're, all family in some sense, and how we should look after each other. And, like I said, there's positive stuff happening out there, unfortunately, and like, news and all sorts of other stuff tends to focus on all the horrible things that we tend to do to each other. There's a lot of good out there happening too, but I guess you have to search a bit more to find it.
Absolutely.
Apparently that's not exciting news,
Yeah, apparently. But it's interesting. I read an interesting article some months ago, and it was like something along the lines of, what would life have been like if the pandemic had happened or COVID had happened in 2005? And it was a really interesting thing because you kind of think like, oh, 2005, all right, yeah, the iPhone hadn't been invented yet. there was no FaceTime,
no social media,
no social media. Yeah, like Skype only did voice calls at a time. They hadn't even started doing video calls and stuff. When you really think about it, it's like, oh man, this would have been a whole lot worse.
Good God.
Yeah.
Full on lockdown.
Or arguably better.
Well, or arguably better, right? Yeah, it depends on, of course, yeah. But
Full on lockdown, you've either got to talk to someone at home, or God forbid, or you got to read. That's it. That's pretty much all you had, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. No Netflix. No
Netflix.
Yeah, no Netflix.
Yeah.
I remember around about that time, I was living in a small cottage out on the sticks, out in the English countryside. And although we had a broadband connection, this was, of course, broadband by like 2005 standards. And I remember iTunes had just started doing movies. So, but with my connection, I had to basically set the download in the morning. So it'd be like, me and my partner, we were like, okay, what movie shall we watch tonight? Okay, this movie. Okay, I'm going to start the download. And then you start it in the morning, and then by evening, it would have been...
You might have a movie.
Yeah, it was like... And then, of course, but not if it had stopped recording or stopped downloading like
Connection
halfway through.
drops at 99%, yeah.
Also, that was about the same time when every time I wanted to export or render a Premiere Pro video that was like 2 minutes long, it would take all night.
Oh, goodness.
Those are the times.
Those are the days.
So when you travel, how much gear do you normally take with you?
Really depends on the trip. I try not to bring more than I need to. I used to early on in the career, I'd bring everything in the kitchen sink because I never wanted to be without. But that's just not fun to carry all that stuff. Yeah. And of course, airlines are getting more restrictive on weights and all sorts of other stuff as well. So, I mean, I try to be pretty pointed for the projects that I'm working on. Like this last trip to Iceland, for example, I knew beforehand when I was working on those few marketing campaigns, I was working on two main subject matters. One was the volcano, so I had to bring my drone and those pieces. And then also I was going up to a remote island in northern Iceland called Grimsey Island, which is home to tens of thousands of the Atlantic seabirds that are up there, like puffins and Arctic terns and all sorts of stuff. It's one of the best places to photograph those birds in all of Iceland. And so I brought my big wildlife telephoto lenses. And then for the rest of the trip, I also had like maybe just like one or two wide angles to kind of counter match along with the drone. So it was kind of minimalized the amount of gear I need to bring. Whereas before I might need to bring all my wildlife stuff and all my landscape stuff. And as I've shot in a mixture of genres, it just gets too cumbersome and weighs too much and whatnot. So it's easier for me when I do just landscape, like I'm just going to Patagonia or something like that. I'm just there to use, mostly wide angle stuff. And then, two bodies just in case, a wide angle lens, mid range and like a 7200. And like, it's a small, simple setup. It's mostly the wildlife stuff that throws a wrench into my plans these days, because those big 400 and 600, millimeter prime, Sony lenses are, they're lighter than they've always ever been, but they're still big and bulky. So it becomes problematic depending on where I'm going. Iceland's easy, but like if I fly to Africa and then I got to take a small domestic, puddle jumper to get to some remote place, like it becomes a challenging aspect with weight and stuff like that. So it becomes a bit of creative Tetris when it comes to packing, but also for weight planning as well. For those situations.
You can just wear a jacket onto the plane. You can kind of attach them on the inside, There we go.
A friend that was coming to help me film some of the marketing pieces in Iceland, he had too much stuff and he wanted to bring his 400 2.8 to photograph the puffins as well. And so he brought it as a third carry-on, which you're not supposed to do. But he essentially called it his medical device, and it was in this like own little private case. And so they're like, "Oh, a medical device? Yeah, of course you can bring that on." And so he was able to get away with it. You can't use that trick everywhere, but apparently some places you can.
Good to know. See, not just regular photography advice on this podcast.
No, absolutely. Tricks of the trade.
Exactly.
That's what we're getting here. I think one of the things that is that people are interested in always, because I sort of get these questions a lot, is how a trip like that is financed. Do you get sponsors on board beforehand, or do you sort of lay out the money and then try and monetize the project so that you're making a return? How does it actually work mechanically?
Yeah, it depends. There's three general main pathways, right, for any of these types of trips. For trips that I'm doing marketing campaigns on, depending on the size of the campaign, sometimes I build into the contract where I get 50% of the contract up first. So if it's a $30,000 project, I'll ask for $15,000 upfront to cover those initial upfront expenses. If it's a smaller campaign, then generally I just expense it out and then just get paid after the fact. And so that's kind of one way to do it. You're either expensing out beforehand or partially expensing out. You're doing a marketing campaign. The other way is if I am doing it more so freelance, where I'm just kind of have this idea of what I'm doing, and I either haven't had time or haven't been able to pitch or sell it to a company, or build it into a product or service that I offer myself. Then I'm just going to finance it myself, and then after the fact, I'll worry about licensing or finding different pathways for that. So, like for the volcano in Iceland, like I will take a lot of that content and then license that video content once I've processed it and put it into pieces to stock video sites, for example, things like that. And then the third is where it's one of my own product or services. That's where like I'm running a workshop. So I'm getting, I'm making quite a bit of money from all the deposits coming in, but also when all the full tuitions are due, which is usually 3 to 4 months before a workshop. So I already have all those funds to begin with. And then I'm able to oftentimes, like I said, piggyback off of those experiences where I was already teaching this workshop in Iceland that got pushed back from 2020. And then weeks leading up to it, I was like, hey, this would be great for a few different projects. So let me reach out to, Dell or Western Digital or Microsoft or Google or whoever it is I'm trying to pitch the idea and say, hey, I'm going to this amazing location. I have a small film crew. We can do some cool stuff. Like, do you have any needs or interest? Or sometimes I have a project in mind. And then I'll piggyback off of that to save myself additional expenses, spend an extra 4 or 5 days or a week, depending on the needs of the project. And then I'm making the profit from the workshop and then the marketing campaign, or sometimes it's the marketing campaign and then freelance stuff afterwards. And every once in a while, I just don't want to deal with any of it. And then I just will pay all of it up front and we'll just go and have fun and shoot what I want to shoot and then worry about making a living off of it afterwards. Those are the easiest ones because then I don't have any responsibilities and I can kind of just relax and have a little bit more downtime. Sometimes I find myself piggybacking off of too many things. So it's like, I'm going to go here and do this. And then I'm going to add this and I'm, and then another project gets added onto it, another project, and all of a sudden I'm like working my butt off, making a lot of money, but like I don't have any downtime. And like, I don't know. Like I said, I've been doing this for 15 years. I'm more about working smartly rather than working harder, and to make more money, to be more strategic about it. And so I try to refrain from those when I can avoid it, so that I make sure that I'm not working a job that feels like a job. I'm still enjoying myself, even if it's long hours, even if I'm, freezing cold waiting for a volcano to erupt or whatever's happening. I want to still be enjoying it. And if I'm working all the waking hours of the day, that's not so fun for me. So I try to refrain from that. And I like saying no to companies, which is a great experience to have that luxury to say, this is not going to work out. We'll do it another time. Passing up on money, which could be nice, is always a freeing experience from a financial standpoint.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
How it's something that's quite I think would be quite interesting to a lot of people out there is those, and I'm sure you've built a lot of these relationships up over many years, but pitching to companies like Dell, for example, how did you first go about those kind of pitches? I'm sure was it different in the early days compared to how it is today?
A little bit, but not too much different. It depends on the company, right? So the bigger companies, the $1 billion companies, the Sonys, the Dells, like those guys they have marketing departments, and oftentimes they have social media departments that are wrapped into the marketing arm of their enterprise. But the vast majority of like what they do or how they organize, say, social media or marketing campaigns is actually done through external third-party marketing firms, right? So it's been quite advantageous for me over the years to be able to make these connections with a marketing firm that has multiple different clients. And so maybe they'll reach out to me, or I'll reach out to the firm will reach out to me because they came across other work that I've done, or I'll reach out to a company and say, hey, I want to do this project. And they're like, hey, that's great. We use this firm. You have to, collaborate with them. And so I'd reach out to them and then do a project. And I'm a big proponent of under promising, over delivering, especially on those initial, relationship building projects. And then they're happy with the results. And then that same marketing firm will have 30 other different companies they represent, and they might have other opportunities down the line where I don't have to work or bid or do anything. They're like, hey, we also have this project for Hilton, or we have this project for whoever, and they'll just come to me with work, which is great. But in terms of how that initially starts, oftentimes if it's a cold pitch, and what I mean by cold pitches means that you don't have a relationship. So it's not like people at Dell, like I text them and I'm like, hey, this is going to be a great idea. We should do something. Like that's a relationship that's built up. That's a hot pitch, because it's something that it's a relationship that's been developed. But for the cold pitches, one of my favorite platforms to use is actually LinkedIn. And I think it's a social media platform that a lot of entrepreneurs negate or don't even think about. And what LinkedIn does for me is that it allows me to cut through the noise of, saying you come across a company you want to work with and you pitch them on Instagram. Well, again, whoever is running the Instagram account, if the company is big enough, is not going to be the actual company you're pitching. It's going to be some other small marketing firm, and generally some person that is, a entry-level position handling a social media account, right? So they're not the ones that control the purse strings. Where with LinkedIn, I can sit there and say, okay, who's the marketing manager or the project manager or the social media manager for Samsung North America, or for Dell in the US, or for Garmin, or for whoever it is. And then through a paid account with LinkedIn, which costs a certain amount of dollars a month, you have the ability to send X number of these cold emails. I think they call them in-mails, where I then pitch this a very light pitch, very soft pitch of, this is who I am, this is what I do, this is why I like what you're doing, and I'm interested in doing something. And then see if I get a response. And then usually that will build the relationship from there. And that's something that a lot of people can do. And I think a lot of people don't do because they are too afraid of rejection, or maybe they spend too much time pitching companies on Instagram, which aren't even actually, like I said, talking to the companies or talking to someone that cares or knows, that decides who does campaigns, things like that. I think so often when it comes to marketing, it's really about networking. It's about talking to the right people at the right time. And I think that plays quite a big role. Yeah. Another small little tidbit, just a tip for you guys that are watching or listening, is that it really pays dividends to understand the fiscal calendar of the companies you're working with, especially the bigger companies. Little companies, it doesn't matter as much, but the big companies, it's huge. And what I mean by that is that if you pitch a great idea to a company in the middle of their fiscal quarter, oftentimes they have already expensed all of their income, their budget for that fiscal quarter. But if you understand where their fiscal quarter ends and when they begin, those are the two best times for me to pitch, either at the very end, which means that a company or a department has income they have to spend before the fiscal quarter ends, or they won't get that same amount or more the next fiscal quarter. Then they're eager to say yes, since they have to expense the money. Or at the very beginning, that means the next fiscal quarter has started, which means that they now have a larger budget to work with. And so knowing those fiscal quarters, having them in my calendars for each of the big companies I work with, gives me a much better idea of when to pitch companies' ideas, not just coming up with a great idea, because timing is also quite imperative, almost as imperative as talking to the right people when it comes to doing those types of projects, or trying to dip your toes into the marketing space of photography or video work.
God, that was another one of those moments that you should go and rewind and re-watch there. Wow, that is just some cracking information and tips there. Just absolutely cracking. So when you are going for those, in particular those cold pitches to companies, are you, or do you typically just go down the straight kind of, just call it an email for now kind of route, but perhaps through LinkedIn, or do you have a kind of a PDF, let's say, of something you're actually pitching? Do you go that kind of extra mile, something to send them? I'm struggling to think of the word that I want to use for it right now, but
it's I think the correct term, for at least for the industry, is pitch deck. So yeah, I mean that's typically stage 2. So the problem with cold emails is that you have to assume that other people are smart enough to try to be doing the same thing, right? So if I'm pitching a social media manager or a marketing manager for a company, I had to assume they're getting a bunch of other emails from other people doing similar things. And the reason I have to take that into account is because if you send, it's like applying for a job, right? And having a resume that's like 15 pages long compared to having something like a cover letter that gives you a summation of exactly who you are and what you're doing. You don't want to give someone you don't know or don't have a relationship too much stuff to chew on because they're busy. They have other things to do. They're probably looking at other pitches or other ideas, or they have other time constraints. And so for that first initial email is really just a meet and greet. It is a, hi, so-and-so, my name is Colby Brown. This is who I am. I've been in the industry for this long. I worked for National Geographic and these other companies. I have a really, solid social media following with X number of whatever it is. I came across you releasing X number of, X projects. I think this is very fascinating for, A, B, and C reasons. Personally, I do a lot of traveling around the world to very exotic and beautiful locations. And there might be some synergistic opportunities for us to work together to help promote some of the amazing products and services that you guys are offering. I've already, sometimes if it's a company that I already own their own products that I purchased with my own money, I'll include that in there. Like I'm letting them know who I am, what I have to offer, why I'm interested, and an inkling of what I want to do. If you are interested, let's have a conversation about that. And if they respond, which often they do now, but early in my career, they didn't as often, then that next step, they're like, yeah, this sounds great. What did you have in mind? And then I'll put together a professional, more polished pitch deck using things like canva.com or something like that, which are really easy for people that aren't into graphic design, to put together a proper plan, an idea that I want to pitch, including budgets and all sorts of other stuff. But it's very presumptuous to think that A, they want to work with you from the beginning, and B, that they're going to look through everything you send them on that first initial email. And so I try to keep, like I said, keep it short and sweet, couple sentences, maybe 2 paragraphs max for that first initial cold email, and then go from there. And like I said early on, for you guys that are listening, expect rejection, or at least the worst than rejection is silence. Don't take it personally. Business is not personal. That's another tip for you guys. Separate your own personal anxieties with the whole business side of things. But just keep plugging away. And when you do get a success and someone reaches back out and said, this is interesting, then, work on putting together, pitch decks. You can do research on Google, how to put together a pitch deck or what's important in it. Make it visually inspiring. Because, whether you're doing video work or photography work, we're visual mediums. And I can't tell you how many people or how many photographers, videographers, pitch decks or websites or things that I've seen that are absolutely atrocious. I don't understand that. You should definitely play that up and try to inspire with the stuff that you're trying to pitch, especially if you're trying to get paid. But yeah, that generally, like I said, long-winded answer, that comes down to the second phase of things rather than setting too much information up first and getting a bit too presumptuous that you're going to get hired for the job before you even apply for it.
I think the recruitment analogy there, or applying for a job, is spot on for it. I've had to review CVs and things like that in past work, and you're absolutely right. You read that cover letter first, and if that doesn't sell you,
you don't even look at the rest. You don't
even get to the CV. It never gets that far necessarily. But if it does, that's great. Move on to the next stage. That might be, in typical recruitment, that'd be a phone screen. Then you move on to a face-to-face interview, and then you're kind of on. It's exactly the same kind of idea there. And if you can use that as an analogy to get your head around why you do these type of things, that's gold. You'll love it. That's great. Thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely. Well, I think whether it's stuff like that or even other nuances within business, I think creatives have a tendency to overcomplicate things. Like the core fundamentals of business really haven't changed in the last couple of 100 years. There's new technologies, there's new things that make certain things or communication or our ability to create easier, but those core fundamentals are not overly complicated. And I think that where a lot of creatives struggle is, as I mentioned before, they either automatically look at the business side of things in this negative light, or they overcomplicate it because they take everything personally. And I think that, again, is a trying to figure out how to compartmentalize and separate those out allows you to at least have the opportunity to think more logically, and break down, as we just, as you just mentioned about what I was talking about with the resume stuff, like that's a logical sense, right? If I'm reaching out to a company, I don't want to throw up all over them with all the stuff that I want to do because they're not going to pay attention. Like in a logical mind, that makes sense. But if you're overly excited and you're like, I deserve this and all this is going to happen, like you might send them a, 5-chapter, email about, what you want to do and why you're great and all these other things. Like we're not entitled to anything. I think that's a big challenge with the current state of photography, is that you think just because you have talent or you can take good images or video that you deserve either accolades or likes or shares or to be hired for jobs. And that's not necessarily how it works. You also have to have the, business acumen, and you have to be able to negotiate and have relationships and develop those over time. And the business side of things is logical. It's analytical. And there's ways to be creative within that, but I at least I personally have found separating the personal attachment to what I feel is my skills or the quality of my work early on in my career has been a blessing, that has allowed me to sidestep all what I consider high school drama from that phase of this type of work, and to not take it personally when I get rejected early on, or when I, didn't get a job, or when things didn't do great on social media. Like it just takes time. And having that right mindset, I think, helps us think logically about how the business side of things work, which, like I said, just really hasn't changed over the millennia.
Yeah. The rejection thing is it is definitely a thing. I mean, I think both Nick and me, I used to be a session musician for like 25 years before I even, started in professional photography as such. And you really get used to rejection really quickly in the music industry. And it's, it's basically that's the status quo. And you just, perseverance is the other thing that, perseverance and follow-up, as I always say, is extremely important. The amount of times that things have come out of follow-ups, for example, where the initial response was no response, and then a few weeks later, you follow up and you go like, hey, I was just wondering, whether you had time to think about this, blah, blah. You copy the previous email in, and very often I find that then, conjures up a response, and sometimes a positive response, which is great.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you think about that again from a logical standpoint, it's like, or from an emotional standpoint, like I send this out to someone. They don't send back. What's wrong with me? What's wrong with my work? I'm doubting everything. I'm never going to follow back up. When in reality, that person's busy. Maybe they wanted to, or they didn't, or they forgot, or they didn't see your email, or whatever it is. You provide that extra opportunity to kind of follow up and restart the conversation. You don't want to be like that psychotic, significant ex, where like 2 days later you're like, dude, what's your problem, man? Why don't you like my work? Why don't you hire me? And then like 3 days later, like, I'm sorry, I was drinking. Like it just doesn't work out. But no, you're 100% right. I mean, the networking side is huge. It's, like I said, it's about who you know, and it's about timing and being able to follow up and having those interesting conversations, and including, with people that you've had success with, right? So a company that I've worked with, again, like Dell's a great example. Like I work with them multiple times throughout the year. Like maybe 6 months will go by and I've been busy and they've been busy. Like I'll just shoot an email and say, hey, just checking in. How you guys doing? You guys got so many great stuff coming out. Like you're giving a reason to be present in the conversation. Yeah. Those are positive forms of communication that I think can be very advantageous and is key on that whole networking side of the business side of photography.
It's very easy to forget that, especially with emails and everything. Of course, we're in a time where a lot of it is like is written communication, as in like emails, social media, messaging, whatever. But it's sometimes it's easy to forget that at the other end there's still a human being there. And everything that applies to, human to human conversation still applies. It's just the delivery format is different. So, it's once you sort of remove yourself from the initial kind of emotional response and you kind of realize that that's actually what's going on, it's much easier to then go, okay, well, maybe they didn't have any time to email me back. I'm just going to shoot them another email. It's easy then. It's just like, texting, I don't know, sometimes I text my wife and I don't get a response because she's actually driving and she can't text back.
Yeah, you're not getting a divorce just because she doesn't respond back, right?
Yeah, exactly right.
Exactly.
I mean, that's the thing. I mean, that's a typical situation. You send a text, I sent a text to my wife. She's in the car, she's driving. Clearly, she can't text back. An hour later, she's arrived at the superstore, done all the shopping. Like 2 hours later, she would have just forgotten the fact that there was, I mean, that's just normal and that's just life and that's just how things go. And so, follow-ups, it's
if you're the one instigating something, if you're the one sending that pitch, you're the one with the emotional attachment to that action.
Yep.
Not the person receiving it. They have no in any way attachment.
Yeah. But the other thing,
and sometimes it takes being told that for it to just click and to realize, because oh my god, and this applies to everything in your personal life, work, business, whatever it might be. But sometimes it does take someone to just tell you and just get rid of that little kind of screen that you've got over it that just lifts away, and you suddenly, we've used this word a couple of times today, that it's freeing. You go, oh my god, it just opens up this whole new world of possibilities for you. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And of course, it's difficult for any creative, I think, to separate themselves from their art, no matter whether it's like music or photography or whatever it may be, because you invest so much of yourself into it. And of course, if somebody rejects it or, like you said, even worse, doesn't respond at all, it's easy to take that as a reflection on yourself.
You.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. No, I 100% agree. And it's, I think you're right. I mean, I think people do need to hear that to kind of remind themselves that, other people aren't going to care about your stuff as much as you. Like,
exactly. Yeah, absolutely.
It's just the reality.
Yeah.
I mean, my wife doesn't care about my work as much as I do. Like, how am I expect some random stranger halfway across the world working in a Fortune 500 company to?
Yeah.
Again, as you reiterated, it's a freeing experience. Like, people aren't going to care about your stuff as much as you want them to. And part of your job, especially if you're trying to do this from a financial standpoint, is educating people on the value you bring to the table.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you just assume that people understand or appreciate your value, that's what we call entitlement. Yeah. And you are not entitled to get any job. You are not entitled to get accolades. You're not entitled for people to love your stuff. Sometimes it requires that extra work through the right channels to be able to educate people through these opportunities, to be like, this is why you should hire me. And this is why it's good. And I'm not taking it personally that I have to explain it to you. But in order to have that conversation, you have to kind of separate your ego out of it. Yeah. And for some photographers, strangely, that's a challenge. I don't get it, because if you think about it, like, we're probably past the stage of having like another Annie Leibovitz, certainly having another Ansel Adams. Yeah. Like 20 years from now, 30 years from now, 40 years from now, like whenever I'm dead, like, people probably are never going to remember my name in terms of the photo industry. And I'm okay with that. Like, we have to we have to be okay with that notion that that we don't have those types of people. The industry is different than it was 50 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. And like I said, again, that's freeing. It's freeing not to have the ego tied to it. It's freeing just to do this because I love it, not because I need someone else to tell me that I'm good at it. There's lots of benefits to having that type of mindset.
I mean, that has actually, I think both for Nick and I, that has really been our experience also, like, through the whole pandemic, like over the last 16 months. Because for me, for example, normally I specialize in shooting people, as in like with a camera, the headshot business wasn't exactly flourishing throughout lockdown. When obviously you can't get another human being in front of your lens.
It makes it a challenge.
Yeah, it's a challenge. I mean, I don't have a lens long enough for that to work. But, and the other thing is, of course, conferences, which is just a thing that I used to shoot a lot before the pandemic. Also, they're not happening. So, immediately it was a matter of like, okay, well, we're going to do some other things. Let's find other stuff to do. And to not only keep ourselves like creatively, fulfilled and everything, but also, of course, it's an opportunity to look at other avenues and changing things around. And it's easy then, because you can then take the bits that you didn't like about what you did before, and you can change them, and you've got a perfect opportunity. And sometimes it just takes a full-on, bus stop to basically, kickstart you into that.
Sure,
in a sense.
absolutely.
So, yeah, I mean, and a lot of the stuff that that Nick and I've worked on like over the last 18 months, we've done literally for no other reason other than we thought it was a good idea. That was it. Like literally, there was no like, I mean, even this podcast, there was no thought about monetizing it, anything like that. That wasn't why we started doing it at all. It was just like, we literally just thought, this might be a good idea. Let's do that.
Yeah. Well, again, it's freeing. I can't, I keep saying that, repeating that over and over again, but like you've broken free from those shackles of like, I have to do this for X, Y, and Z. Yeah. Like the Giving Lens, I started it because I wanted to.
Exactly.
Not because, I haven't made a penny off of it. Like I pay other employees. I don't make any money off of it. Like it was meant to make a difference and to do some good. It was it was a passion project. And I think that if you ask a lot of the big photographers, at least from the last generation of people out there, the vast majority of them started the career on these ideas of either passion projects or of just doing something because you thought it was a good idea, not because you were like, I'm going to make a ton of money doing this, or I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. And then out of that opens up other doors or windows, which may provide some new revenue streams or things, but that's not the reason you do it. And in doing so, you create a structure for either the project or the entity or whatever it is that allows for exponential more flexibility and enjoyment out of it as well. You're not necessarily tied to those other things of like, oh, I have to do this, I have to sell this, I have to sell ad space, like whatever it is. Those may come down the line, but at least for that initial inception idea, it opens up those doors, which is phenomenal. It helps you be more creative, in my mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So, Colby, what have you got planned in the next few months or over the next year?
Yeah, so I have a handful of projects I'm working on putting together. Right now, I'm actually trying to see if I can make a project work in Zambia in early September to a place called South Luangwa National Park, which is one of the highest concentration of leopards in Africa. And it's kind of like a bit of a hidden gem, kind of almost like what Botswana was like 20, 30 years ago. Mm-hmm. So working on that. I'm going to be up in Italy in the Dolomites in October, sans a lockdown, for a workshop, which should be great. And then early November, I'll be up in Alaska, in Haines, Alaska, photographing bald eagles for the first start of the month. And then assuming Japan doesn't go crazy with COVID and the Olympics, I'll be in Japan to shoot fall colors just before the U.S. Thanksgiving. And that's kind of rounding out my year, at least in terms of general plans. I'm going to spend a bit of time here in this home studio doing some more tutorials and post-processing, things like that, just to kind of round out the digital education space, see how that thing progresses over time, and kind of build into 2022 and handful of trips, certainly around the world, workshops, all sorts of other stuff that I'm, excited about. Some stuff that's already set in motion, some that are already planned. But of course, waiting just to see how the next, few months play out before I start really solidifying some of those details. Just in case, we have another resurgence or something else happens, or I'm trying to be as flexible as possible with also trying to plan out. Usually I'm booked out like 2 years in advance, and now it's kind of like 6 to 8 months is like a realistic time frame, and even then sometimes things happen, as you know. So I guess we'll see how it goes, but that's at least the next 6 months.
How do you manage like family time and being away so much? How do you balance it up?
Well, the interesting thing is that when I'm home, like I'm home 24 hours a day. Like I most of my good friends are all other photographers. No one lives around me. I have, we live out in the sticks out here in Eastern Pennsylvania. My parents live close. We see them every once in a while. But for the most part, like I'm home, I'm here all the time. Like I don't go out, drinking with buddies. I don't go to concerts. I don't do the things. Like I'm either traveling, around the world in some exotic location, or I'm home, in my studio or in my pajamas or hanging out with a family. And so that kind of helps, because I think a lot of people think like, oh, you travel so much. Like that's true. But for people that have a standard, 8 to 5 or 9 to 5 job, like you're gone for the vast majority of the day, especially if you have kids, and like you're seeing them for a few hours, but it's not the same thing. And so like we homeschool our son here in the US because we live remotely. So my son learns from school, takes school here at home. My wife is his teacher. And so we're constantly doing stuff together. And so I think that helps. As I mentioned before, they also piggyback off of some of the projects I work on around the world. So they just came to Iceland. I've taken them to the Caribbean a number of times, in Central and South America. I think maybe Africa. I'll do another year or two, depending how things work out. But constantly trying to show the world, my son, the world a bit more, and let that be a bit of his educational classrooms as well. And that gives us more opportunity to spend time together in some cool, pretty amazing experiences that a lot of other people don't have the opportunity to have. And so we make it work. But yeah, it's a challenge. On a given year, 4 to 6 months out of the year, my wife is kind of like a single mom. And so it takes, having that support and that understanding from your significant other makes a huge difference. And I was very honest from the beginning, from our first date, which was 12 years ago, 13 years ago now, exactly who I was, what I'd planned on doing, what I was doing. I laid it all out on the table from the very beginning, which I think definitely helped, because a lot of relationships before then failed because maybe I didn't do that, or probably for many different reasons. But when you're away like that, like it's like, having a family member in the army or in any other job that travels quite a bit. It requires, resilience, communication, and openness, and understanding and support, and spending as much time as you guys can together when you're together. And I think that's key. And something that we've continued to work on over the years. As my companies have grown, I used to have a bad habit of constantly being on my phone, like not on the phone, but like responding to emails and doing all sorts of other stuff, like 24 hours a day. And that was problematic because I was home, but I wasn't really here, wasn't paying attention. And so having those conversations with my wife or my son, I distinctly remember when he was like 3 or 4 and we were in Colorado. I lived in Boulder, Colorado at the time. And we're sitting in the living room and I'm playing with him, but I'm on my phone. I was responding to an email or something, and he walks over to me and he grabs the phone, and he's 3, so he's tiny. So he grabs the phone like this, very carefully. He grabs it and then walks over to the table across the room and puts it down and walks over, and he goes, "Dad, no more phone." And I was like, oh. Yeah. Broke my heart. And I was like, I am a horrible father. And so it was little moments like that really just opened my eyes to again, prioritize things. And so when I'm home, like I got to do work, I have things to get done. But when we have time together, like that's my purpose. I'm not going to be answering calls. I'm not going to be responding to emails. I'm going to try to stay off social media. Like I just want to be present as much as I can. And so, we made it work. But it's certainly been a journey.
Definitely. And I think from the way you've just described things there, I'm willing to bet, even though you are away several months of the year, you actually make it work better than many other couples out there, many other families. So many people I know, and myself included over the years, you aren't in that moment. In fact, you're rarely in that moment. You're always distracted by something else.
I think we take it for granted. And I still struggle with it. There are times where I'm still like hyper obsessed over something happening or a new project launching or whatever it is. But it's always good to be reminded of the significance of being present, whether it's for a family or whether it's for yourself, to actually be there for the journey. I mean, I in a similar vein, but not through social media, when early in my career, it was something that I also noticed just through photography, is that I was experiencing so much of my travel around the world in these amazing locations and these amazing experiences that a lot of people would literally die for, like want to have these opportunities. And I'd see everything through the blinders of my camera. And it was very limiting. It was, I'm there to obviously capture something or document or to film something. And I needed to make sure that I was obviously doing that, but I wasn't building in time to actually just enjoy the experience, to be present in the moment, to see a beautiful sunset set over Antarctica, or, the beautiful light, filtering through the jungles with these silverbacks. Like I was just so hyper obsessed over, getting the shot. Nowadays, 15 years in, I spend the vast majority of my time out in the field with my camera actually away, which has helped me not only appreciate those moments and the journey and those experiences, but also, again, be much more pointed in terms of when I choose to take my camera out, when I choose to photograph something, which means that they're a bit more special and they're a bit more effort and thoughts put into them. But also, I don't have like 10,000 other images I don't have to go through and cull now, because I was, trying to view everything through my viewfinder and get all the 10,000 other images that I didn't need, rather than the couple hundred that are actually important for whatever I was doing. And so the conversation just reminded me of that, is that I've suffered through that a couple of times, one through social media, just in general, with being attachment to our phones, like most of us have, but also just through being creative and hyper focusing on photography and videography, and missing out on some of those experiences of, like I said, just feeling the wind hit your face in a cool, amazing location that you might not ever experience again, as something that I try to never take for granted again.
That really very much reminds me of like when I first got started in concert photography, because I used to basically, I don't know, I used to shoot so many frames throughout a performance. It was unreal, and you'd literally come home with like 8,000 images, but you completely miss, in a sense, you miss what's happening on stage.
Yep.
And so, over time and with experience, I shoot a lot less, but strangely, the images are a lot better.
Sure.
It's like, because you start to develop a sense for the key moments, and just actually by watching the artists on stage for a bit, you get a real sense as to who they are, what they like as performers. And, with, over 2 decades of performance experience myself, I kind of get an idea as to what somebody's like whether, the guitarist is fixed on a spot, or whether he's like a person who takes up the whole real estate on the stage, or, what kind of gesturing the singer is doing, or whatever. You kind of get a sense for the person, and that then basically informs you as to what the key shots are that you need to get, and the way you want to capture that performance, rather than just sitting there on like auto drive going, you know what I mean? Before you know it, it's like you haven't seen any of the performance. You really haven't got a clue as to what they were like as a band or as a performer, and you're stuck with like 8,000 images that you could have to go through and weed out. This just takes way too much time. Way too lazy.
So true. So true.
So we've come to the end of Camera Shake Podcast, episode 67. Colby, thank you so much for being our guest on the show. It was super entertaining, and of course, we've learned a ton. I hope our listeners and viewers out there have too. And remember, if you are listening to the audio version of this podcast, then you can hop over to YouTube if listening to our sultry voices isn't enough, but you want to see our beautiful faces in full Technicolor, you can do that. Having said that, if you don't know, and if you have made it through to the end of this episode, first of all, well done. But you can also hop over to our website, camerashakepodcast.com, where you can join us in the Camera Shake community. That'd be super awesome. You see a button, click on it, put your stuff in. We'll send you a newsletter once in a while. We'll promise we won't bombard you with stuff, but it'd be awesome for you to be part of the community. Anyway, that being said, we'll see you again next week for another episode of the Camera Shake Podcast.